Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 12th of March, comes to you from London. And see the dollar index just falling away a little bit here, so just turning back into that bearish territory on the short-term chart, but the medium and long-term charts are still bullish. Euro is therefore strengthening against the dollar on the short-term chart, so we are just seeing that improvement. And against the yen, the dollar actually is looking stronger, so yen weaker. Sterling actually recovered a bit yesterday, quite sharply, of hopes for Brexit. So interesting, the vote today will be interesting to see how the market reacts. We've still got these big downside targets hanging over us, so it's not a done thing that sterling won't fall. But for the moment, it's looking short-term bullish with a target of 136.60 on the short-term chart. So that's quite a move. The vote will be critical for how sterling reacts, and we see it's stronger against the euro and against the Footsie. We're also up to 133, and against the Aussie dollar, we're weaker, but we are still just pushing to higher there. Bitcoin, little change here, just back into bearish territory on the short-term chart. Medium term, we're kind of wandering out, but no signs really of building a new trend. The S&P 500 index was up quite sharply yesterday, so recovery after last week's sell-off. But we're still in bearish territory on the short-term chart. The Nasdaq has actually just managed to climb back above, and we'll look at the individual stocks in a minute. The Dow is also still bearish on the short-term chart, and the Russell 2000, the broader-based index, is also bearish on the short-term chart. Looking at the futures this morning, we've got the S&P future is up 0.25%, and the Nasdaq E-mini is up 0.4%, suggests that the US market will open higher. Footsie is down slightly this morning in the UK. Stronger sterling probably having an impact on the blue chip index there. It's really in the doldrums. Where I think in the UK market, we're really waiting now the outcome for Brexit. And we're seeing here on the medium-term chart, we're up this morning 0.5%, but we're still in bearish territory on the short-term chart and long-term as well. The DAX is up nearly 0.3% this morning, not quite enough to get it back into bullish territory. And the CAC 40 is up 0.25% and has actually held its trend. One of the few markets that has been relatively strong and held its short-term uptrend through the recent sell-off that we've seen. The Japanese market up 1.5%, weaker yen helping there, and the Hang Seng up 1.5%, back into bullish territory just on the short-term chart. Good upside targets, about 4% there. Looking at the S&P 500 the S&P composite for the Shanghai market, we're seeing here that we're actually also up another 1%. Remember, we were down 4% on Friday, up 2% yesterday, up 1%. We're clawing back that Friday loss. We have a bit of work to do to activate these upside targets, but if we do that, that would be the beginning of China going into a full recovery mode. And that would also take the price through on the long-term cloud chart. The Sensex in India up 1.3%. This market now looking very strong on all three time frames. So India is still looking very good. The Aussie market is down very slightly, but still looking pretty good on all three time frames. Brent crude up 1%, and that's really taken us into medium-term bullish, and so we are just seeing Brent now pushing higher there, and WTI also up 1%. So we're seeing that push as well. US nat gas is up to $2.78, but we're seeing here that's still bearish on all three time frames, so nat gas not looking that strong at all. Taking a look at gold, we see gold is nudging this $1,300 level again. We're still in the bullish mode here, but we just can't quite break this $1,300 mark at the moment, but we are short-term bullish. No clear upside targets on the short-term chart. And silver also just pushing higher. Here we do have an upside target of about 3.7% to $16 basically. So looks like silver will push higher as well. US 10-year yields sitting in the doldrums at 2.67%. We see really all of this year we've been very flatlining on the 10-year yields. And if we look at German bond prices, they haven't really recovered since last week's rout post the ECB announcements. So that's really just the bond markets looking still as pricing in no interest rates really for this year. This data all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon. If you're a private user, Metastock Zenith, it's effectively the same system. It's brilliant. Gives you good global coverage. And of course, for individual stocks, you can actually start looking at intraday charts, which again is really powerful. So here we can see Apple with the short-term targets. For the stock prices themselves, I'm using Yahoo Finance here just to show the range of feeds that Updata uses. With Yahoo, you're limited to daily charts. You do get intraday updates, so the charts are actually updating live, so the charts are always up to date. But our ability to look at the short term is less good with the Yahoo Finance data feed, but it is free, of course. Weekly chart, daily chart, and here I've got a daily with the on-balance volumes moving average and relative to the Dow Jones index at the start of this year, so I can straight away see the performance. So here we see the world indices. US was up quite strongly, Europe up this morning, and Asian markets, bar the Aussie market, was also quite strong. So these are all coming from Yahoo Finance. So it's great that you can actually see these markets as well. Taking a look at what happened in the US overnight, the best performer in the Dow was the Apple share price, up 3.46%. So just pushing higher there, and the relative performance, we're outperforming the market by 3% so far this year. That's pretty true across the board of tech. We saw Microsoft up 2%, and their relative performance is fairly flat, but they've held on to their performance. They haven't dipped, so that's looking pretty good as well. And we've sort of seen other stocks like IBM, they're up nearly 2% as well. Not enough to change the long-term trend, but medium-term we're looking better. Just a shortage of targets there. The only stock down yesterday after the 7378 crash in Ethiopia was Boeing, and they were down at 12% at one stage. We see this massive candle here. They opened lower and then pushed higher to give us that big green candle. So they fell on the day, but they rose from their open. And so that's not really changed the chart on Boeing very much. We've pulled right back into this sort of support level of the old resistance pattern. It'll be very key to see what Boeing does from here. It had already outperformed the market by 25% this year alone, so it was ripe for a fall. But of course, that incident has really dented the share price yesterday. Looking at the Nasdaq, we saw Macro Libra up 7%. Looking an amazing chart here. We've still got upside targets to around 30% higher. Nvidia also up nearly 7%. Looking set for a recovery here, and good upside targets around 20-24% higher. So we are seeing some quite interesting charts here. On the downside, we had Liberty Global, they were off 1.5%, and Booking.com, they were also down 0.35%. But there were only 5 stocks down in the Nasdaq yesterday, so it's a very strong showing indeed. Taking a look at some of the other bellwethers, Google, Alphabet was up 2.5%. That stock starting to look really quite good on the chart, and again, good upside targets. Amazon also up 3%, looking pretty strong. And if we look at Facebook, they were up 1.5%, and again, medium term looking good, and long term just starting to make that transition recovery. So we've got good upside targets for Facebook despite everything you've seen in the news, and they've outperformed the market by 15% this year, so pretty strong showing there. Taking a look at the Aussie market, it was less good. We had WiseTech Global up 6.06%, and if we look at the other side of it, we had Appen down 9%. We had some pretty big fallers here. That chart's still looking pretty good. Sierra Resources was also down 6%. That chart looking dismal. No clear downside targets, but we've underperformed the market already this year by 25%, so that's not great. Looking at China, it was very strong, of course. We're up another 1%. We see here there was a handful of stocks down, and perhaps the worst performers down 1.8%, but overall China actually starting to recover, and here potentially making new highs on this stock. The Nifty 50 in India is as we saw, the Indian market was up quite strongly. We had Bharti Airtel, not enough to take the long-term chart bullish, but we've got good upside targets, good medium-term recovery, not really showing up yet in the relative, so we need to just keep an eye on that. ICICI Bank, they were up 3%, so that was quite good as well. So we're seeing here making new highs. This is a brilliant looking chart and good upside target. There's only one, but it's still an amazing looking chart as well. Here we see the prices coming in from Yahoo. I've got my system set to bring these in every 1 minute, so looking pretty powerful as well. Taking a look at the downside, we've got Aisha Motors, they were down 1.8%, and Bajaj Finance were down 1.24%. So chart's still looking pretty good, good upside targets. So that's quite key as well. If we take a look at the European market, we've got the Footsie 100 this morning, just ranking by performance. The top performer is Persimmon, up 3.5%. There's been a lot of volatility in this share with everything surrounding the news lately. Royal Bank of Scotland up 3.03% this morning, looking stronger as well, and just starting to really test long-term resistance on both the cloud and the 1% chart. Lloyds Bank, we're seeing banks generally looking quite a lot better this morning. We see Lloyds there, Barclays there also, starting to look like a recovery situation, and that's quite key. And again, we see the prices coming in here live from Yahoo. Looking at the FTSE 250, we've got Cirrus Minerals, they're up 7.8%, CYBG up 5%, and if we go the other end of the scale, Equanti Group down 12%. That's really a dire situation for them. That share price just breaking through that support level this morning and falling away, underperforming so far this year by 15%. Taking a look at the Euro stocks, the European market, we've got Deutsche Post down 2.8%. Airbus, up 2.8%. Airbus up 1.2%. So they've rallied a little bit on Boeing's fall there, but Deutsche Post looking like quite a good recovery. And Adidas also looking stronger there. SocGen, we're seeing banks just looking quite good, and yesterday we saw a lot of banks in the leaders board. Telefonica, the worst performer in Europe at the moment. Bayer in Germany also lower, just trying to recover. So really quite interesting. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.